Today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Tejal Patel, a radiologist. Dr. Patel completed her fellowship in women's imaging and musculoskeletal imaging at the University of Illinois. She is the regional medical director of radiology at Envision Healthcare and manages care at 5 hospitals in Central Florida. She is the chief of radiology at her primary hospital and is also the Department of Radiology chairperson at Osceola Regional Medical Center in Kissimmee. So, Dr. Patel, thank you so much for talking with me today. Let's get started with our first question. When and how did you decide that you wanted to go into medicine and then radiology specifically?
Um, Medicine, I would say probably in college sometime. It wasn't something I was thinking about in high school.
Mhm,
Um, Probably in like my third year or so, but even that I wasn't sure. So I took a year off in between, actually a year and a
mhm,
half, and I did research um before applying to med school. And at that time, 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago, gap years were not like people like, oh my God, you're taking a gap year. But now it's so common. So it's okay if you need to take a gap year. But I took a gap year and then I applied. I just like the sciences. It wasn't like anything like, oh, I wanted to be a doctor since I was 5 years old. So
mhm,
people to have that feeling, they should know that. It's just something I kind of enjoyed and kind of went into that field,
mhm.
following that.
Right.
So,
Which medical education track do you believe is the most beneficial? So, doing undergrad and then med school or a 7-year med program?
so I'm a firm believer that if you know in high school you want to do medicine, like that's
Mhm,
all you can think about ever doing, you're really sure about it, then I do believe the 7 or 8 year med programs, those combined programs, are a good way.
mhm,
Um, but getting into medical school is a whole other process. You get into college and then having to go through the process again of medical school, it's difficult, doing the applications, the MCAT scores, all of that. So I think if people like I didn't know, so it's fine. You do your undergrad and you learn from there. But if, I have a couple of friends, kids right now that they just knew, from ninth grade that they were going to be a doctor. So every summer they
mhm,
did research and every summer they did volunteering at hospitals or going to other countries. And they applied to 7 or 8 year med programs. So it's the best thing for them.
mhm,
So I am, but I'm also not pushing that. If you might be 50-50. You're like, yeah, I might want to be a doctor. Then I would say go through the, undergrad, apply to med school and that process, because becoming a doctor is commitment no matter
yeah,
what. It's a long road getting there. And then even continuing on, it's a long road because, we have to do continuing education. So it's a continual thing. So
mhm,
it's a lot of dedication.
yeah, definitely. Tell us about your work schedule.
Well, I'm a radiologist, so it's a little bit different from someone who's in prior practice and has scheduled patients. My work
Mhm,
schedule is a little bit more flexible since I'm also the director, so I kind of can do my own hours, but I usually work early shifts because I have children, and I try to get in time to pick them up. So mine usually day starts or at work starts around 6:30 in the morning, and
mhm,
then I get out. But since I'm also a director, I have administrative duties. So that's just my clinical,
mhm,
where I'm actually reading scans and seeing patients. But after that, I'm on a lot of Zoom and WebEx calls these days. So, but at least with the technology, I have the ability to be waiting in car line for the kids too at the same time. So
mhm,
it all works out. But that's a typical day. And then of course I do call on call. You're gonna have to work the weekends, and those are both Saturday and Sunday.
mhm.
So it's constant. It's constant.
Right. So I understand that you manage care at 5 hospitals in Central Florida. Please tell us about your daily responsibilities.
Well, luckily, I sit at one hospital. I overlook 5 hospitals, but I have chiefs at those hospitals. So the
Got it.
chief, the department at each hospital really take care of the day to day stuff and all that.
Mhm,
And I don't like to micromanage. I figure if you're a chief of the department at that hospital, you should be able to manage most of the stuff. My part is more, I just might go there once a month or once a quarter to some admin meetings. And really, I let the chief run their hospital. Now, of course,
mhm,
if I ever get a phone call from one of the CEOs of the hospital saying there's a problem, then I'm all over them. But
Mhm.
for the most part, I have really good chiefs. So that's why I just, I do the regional management. I overlook the 5 hospitals.
Mhm.
Of course, the hospital I sit out, that I'm mostly at Osceola Regional, I'm the
Mhm.
chief there also. So then, of course, I'm involved in different hospital committees and, it's just day-to-day stuff, running the radiology department itself, working with the other service lines to make sure we're providing them the care they want, make sure they're giving
Mhm.
us the stuff we need. So that just becomes intertwined in your daily rates. But the 5 hospitals themselves somewhat manage themselves. And then
Mhm.
if they need, I'm available, for guidance.
Got it. What are some interesting things about your job?
Um, well, I mean, basically, right. In a way, it's like I have X-ray vision. I get to see what's inside your body.
Mhm.
Um, even after say the patient comes in the ER, the doctor doesn't know why he's having abdominal pain. I actually see all the organs and
Mhm.
hopefully I can tell them. So, I mean, I think for me, it's a very much of a interactive process because I feel like I can give them the diagnosis, or
Mhm.
at least have a better understanding of what body part or what area is of clinical concern. 'Cause a lot of times people come in and they're just like, oh, I have body aches or I have an abdominal pain. And there's so much stuff that can be going in the abdomen, but I'm actually kind of going in there and seeing what's going on. So
Right.
that's kind of
What are
fun.
Mhm. What are some of the hardest parts of your job?
Um, some of the hardest parts. I don't know. I don't know if there's really one hard part, I don't
Mhm.
really think I have that many hard parts. I mean, I think managing or the department overall, especially, with COVID and staffing issues,
Mhm.
that's the hard part because, radiology is very important, all the support staff. You have the transport people to bring the patient. Then you have the techs that can do the scans,
Mhm.
the techs who can process the scans, so it's all that staffing. I mean, at least for the past 2, 3 years, where that has become a big problem for us.
Mhm. How did the pandemic affect your job?
Well, initially I would say volumes went down, because people
Mhm.
weren't coming to the ER. For us, it's all based on people coming through the ER and them ordering this, scans, the x-rays, the CT scans, the MRIs, the ultrasounds.
Mhm.
And so with the pandemic, people weren't leaving, right?
Mhm.
Uh, they were scared to come into the hospital, right? They think that if I come in the hospital, I'll get COVID.
Right.
So all that, our volumes plummeted. So, that was a tough time. But then,
Right.
once things kind of softened up, volumes went back up. And, because people weren't leaving their house, you don't have trauma either, right? People, if
Mhm.
they're out and about, you're going to have people falling off ladders, getting into car accidents, getting into, what I mean? So you have all that trauma coming in, which keeps you busy. But,
Mhm.
with the pandemic, everything was at a standstill. So, so if volume goes down, you're busy, right? So, um, that's how it affected us.
Mhm. What are some things you wish you knew before entering radiology?
Um, some things I knew before entering. I don't think not much. I mean, I love radiology. That's the only
Mhm.
field I could see myself in medicine. I couldn't practice any other kind of medicine for sure. And
Got it.
luckily, I'm fortunate that I kind of found that out in my 3rd year. So I was able to do not just one elective, but a couple of months in radiology.
Mhm.
So I kind of knew the ins and outs a lot, and I mean, you spend 6 years well, 5 years in residency for radiology, and then I did a fellowship. So, between all that, you kind of figure it out, I think, you know?
Mm.
Um, so it, you know, nothing, I don't think anything's been that surprising, for
Mhm.
me.
Would you have done anything differently on your
Yeah.
journey?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. No, no. I mean, I'm glad I took that time off between college and med school. Got to do research, get published, and I traveled, just stuff that I may not have been able to do later on because after that, being bound to 4 years of med school, 5 or 6 years of residency and fellowship. So it was a
Mhm.
long journey. So,
Yeah.
mm-mm.
We have seen the consolidation of practices and other medical facilities in the market by hospitals. How do you think this impacts doctors, and how do you suggest people entering the field should deal with it?
Um, well, consolidation is all that don't affect radiology that much.
Mhm,
It's with private practice, especially internal medicine and other specialties that are actually seeing patients. Radiologists, they usually either they're in private practice or they end up working for a corporation. Usually,
mhm,
they're not that many hospital employed radiologists.
got
The
it.
cost of
Mhm,
radiology salaries are high, that the hospitals will lose a lot of money. So that's why for us, it's not that much. For us, it's more of if you're a private group, you may get bought out by a corporation, which
mhm,
you may want just so you don't have to worry about the overhead and all the administrative stuff.
mhm,
Um, but very you won't see many hospitals hiring radiologists because they just can't afford it.
mhm.
So
Makes sense. What other leadership roles do you have in your community?
um, so I'm in the Windermere Prep um, Parent Association board. I've been the
Mhm,
treasurer for like now. I've been on the board for about 10 years.
mhm,
Um, and I, of our Central Florida Association of Indian Physicians of
mhm,
Origin, which is a chapter of our national OPI. I just
mhm.
finished my president term there.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so I was president of our COPI, which is the Central Florida chapter of the Indian Physicians. So yeah, and that's a 5-year process because you start out as treasurer and then you just kind of move up the treasurer to secretary to vice president to president elect and then president, and then you still
Mhm,
serve one, past president, immediate past president. So finish that. I sit on the board for the Gujarati Society.
mhm,
Um, we're on the board for IACC, Indian American Chamber of Commerce.
mhm.
Um, Hospital, I sit on a couple of foundation boards. So
Wow,
goes
wow.
on. Yeah.
Mhm. Considering the constant changes in the medical field, what are three pieces of advice you would give to students considering a career in medicine or radiology specifically?
Um, well, with career in medicine, like I've said, you really, really have to want to do it because it is a lot of dedication, a lot of
Mhm,
commitment. You have to remember, you may think you finished studying, but not, because we have to continue to do this thing called CMEs, continuing medical education. So every year you have to have 50 credits and you have to do courses to keep up with what's going on because, in medicine and even radiology, our technology is changing, medicines are changing,
right.
treatments are changing. So you want your
Mhm,
doctor to be up to date, right, with the latest. So you just have to be ready for a life of learning. It's
mhm,
not something it's done. I'm just gonna have a job. Um, but the good thing about I think medicine in general is, or becoming a doctor is, you have that stability, or you'll probably always have a job being a physician.
mhm,
You know, you may not
right.
be able to get a job in a big city, but there's always going
Mhm,
to be a need in a smaller city.
right.
And I would say in this trend market, becoming a primary care physician is probably going to be of more value. A lot of these specialties that are making or were making big money with the government cuts, CMS, all these kind of changes, a lot of the
Mhm,
specialties are get. So the primary care is going to be doing a lot better. So, and a lot of times people, especially when I was becoming a doctor, or even practicing, people were like, oh, they were all just, none of them wanted to do primary care. They all wanted to go do fellowships and become specialized, you know?
okay.
So I think there's a big field in primary health care, and that's
Mhm,
where reimbursements are going to be well, whereas they're going to cut reimbursements in a lot of the specialties because we're costing them a lot of money, you know? Um, so, but yeah, again, you have to be dedicated. It's a long
mhm,
road, you have to be mentally prepared, you
mhm,
know, uh, to spend at least a minimum of 11 years, 4 years undergrad, 4 years of college, and the minimum residency is 3 years. So that's
mhm,
a minimum of 11 years of training before
yeah.
you really become anything, you know?
Mhm,
Um, so yeah, you just have to have that commitment and dedication.
mhm. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I liked how you talked about your leadership positions. They were really interesting.